What up? It's the Dropping Dimes podcast. I'm your host, Mark Veer. Welcome to episode number 5 with special guest coaches Devon Agusi and Chris Moore. Fellas, how we doing?
Well, well,
Doing well.
Appreciate you guys coming on. This is going to be a good one. We have a great relationship. We are in the factory, in the trenches, every day working with kids. I do want to do some quick intros like I do in everyone, how I met you guys. Chris, met you 13 years ago when you stepped into the factory in your shirt and tie that I've never seen you wear again, and hired you. And it's been a great addition to the factory. And you've stayed with us for an extremely long time. And then Devon, I met you through your wife, Menasha. She was at UTSA. You just got done playing. She's the head coach at Harlan now. And was you just trying to figure out your next move? She got us connected. You came by, and here we are 8 years later. To dive into what you guys do, Chris, you're our head skills trainer at Shoot 360 at the factory. And then Devon, you got your founder of Player First Girls Organization. Again, I said it earlier, we have a great relationship. We see each other daily with the average basketball player. And we'll dive into a lot of things today, but that's probably the main topic. I had a lot of parents reach out and ask about what about the kids that don't have opportunities or not skilled enough to play at the collegiate level. And obviously that's a big, big number in San Antonio. So we'll dive into that. But I'll start with the community question. I know you both have listened to the previous 4 podcasts. It's a loaded question, but however you want to touch on it, from the high school level to the grassroots. Chris, we'll start with you, but where do you think San Antonio basketball is today?
From a high school perspective, I think, I had the chance to play in Dallas, and just where we're at a disadvantage is it's a numbers game. Every graduating class in Dallas is just so much bigger than we are in San Antonio. So it's hard to create consistent parity on a year-to-year basis in the city. But the one positive from that is we do a good job, competing lately, getting teams to state, winning state. So I think we've done a pretty good job from a high school perspective in the city. The one area I would like to see improve is getting our youth, getting young kids out to these high school games.
Yep.
There's no better time for a young kid to connect and find a role model. If you know you're going to go to Reagan or Johnson, go watch them play and find a kid to kind of look up to, because one day your goal might be to put on the same jersey. So I think having that connection between the youth and the high schools and getting those seats filled and really kind of creating an environment where these kids can have someone to look up to. And I think that will spark more interest to grow and play the game of basketball and want to work on their skill set to be like that kid there, that player they're looking up to.
And I totally agree. I know it was talked on a previous podcast. Kingston Fleming's top point guard in the country. We haven't seen a Kingston Fleming in San Antonio in a long time. Why is that gym not packed every night? Right. We have L.A. Snead over at Wagner, another high major kid. And that's a great point. I've worked playoff games in Dallas. You know how much I look forward to those games? It's packed house. We show up an hour and a half before the game. There's a line outside. We just don't see that in San Antonio, right? So I appreciate you touching on that, Chris. D, talk to us about the grassroots sites.
sure. Grassroots side. So speaking from my experience, I've been around in the grassroots space for about almost a decade. And it's definitely a loaded question. The boys side, I think in terms of quantity, we're seeing more teams. I believe we're seeing more kids playing. Some due to the fact of fragmentation, as I believe Blue Bay spoke on one of your earlier episodes. Every time you look up, it's a new team and more players. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. Like, it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful game. The game has done so much for all 3 of us on this pod right now, but there are some results that come from it. Where if you have one team, I'll provide some context. You have a team of 8, 9 really good players, and somebody's unhappy with their role or whatnot. You branch off, and they make their own team, and they end up taking 2 of those kids with them, and it may multiply again, and they branch off, and now those 2 or 3 kids, 2 go one way, 1 go another way. But with that comes a result of the talent kind of scattering. So when it's time to compete in city or out of city, I don't think we have the same amount of quality. And not only that, just from a practice standpoint, if you're trying to build these players in practice, I think, it's important that, in practice where those reps are being gained, that, kids are playing against other really good kids. And that happens when the talent gets a little stretched thin. On the girls' side, although we are at a time where the game is becoming more entertaining, so to speak, some people who are just now kind of getting in the girls' game, they're seeing the excitement of it. seem to believe that the numbers may be declining a bit, or maybe just the type of kids are declining. With the emergence of volleyball, you're starting to see some of those more athletic, rangy kids kind of gravitate that way. I feel as if they ask those kids to prioritize in the sport a little bit earlier. So some of those kids kind of migrate that way, and they choose volleyball as their primary sport and sometimes their only sport. So in a game of basketball that's predicated on size, length, and athleticism, we're not seeing those athletes in abundance as we once were. So maybe the numbers per se may not be declining. Again, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think the type of players who kind of help the city continue to grow, I think those numbers are declining. We all can continue to grow the game and help these young people get to where they need to get to. But I think right now on both sides of the fence, I don't think we're in a bad spot. But if things don't kind of gear in a certain direction, we can definitely fall behind the eight ball if we're not already there.
Yeah, those are both good points. And I appreciate you guys seeing it from a different side. I've talked to many people since the podcast started, and it's mixed. Boo Man said it's the worst he's ever seen the city. That's a tough statement. I was like, wow, okay. And he's been around a long time. And other people that have not been in as long, like, well, I don't think it's in that bad of a state, right? So there's some mixed feelings on that. So I appreciate you both touching on that from the high school and grassroots perspective. Purpose of the podcast is just bring awareness, right? Good and bad. But if we can come together as a community and work for the end goal, which is just growing the city and growing the game, I think we'll move in the right direction. All right, Kris, let's move to how you shifted gears in your career. When I had my Admirals, you had a group under the Admirals as well. And you coached with Devon for a little bit with his Player First. But then you decided this AAU stuff isn't for me. I want to focus on just being strictly a skills trainer. Talk to me about that journey and why you made that decision.
Tough decision to make. I really enjoyed my time on both the male and female side, and definitely learned a lot being alongside Coach Devon. But I mean, to be honest, coaching just wore me out, and I've always kind of gravitated towards the player development side and shooting. I felt like I had a little more impact in a individual or small group setting, so I just wanted to spend more time on that side of the rock, And now being with Shoot 360, it gives me a great chance to. We get a lot of kids in the gyms, getting to connect with kids from all over the city, and the goals are vastly different from player to player, and just trying to develop a connection and help understand what they're looking to get out of this game, and how I can use my skill set just to help them succeed. Whether they want to get better just at strictly shooting, or they need to build a certain skill set to help their middle school or high school team improve, or maybe they just want to, be in the gym and use shooting for therapy. Any way I can help to connect and just help a kid succeed is, the route I kind of wanted to take, and Shoot 360 helped me out with that.
Yeah, it's funny you said that. I did the same thing. I was with my Admirals. I was worn out, man. It's a grind, and we'll talk to you, Devon, about that. Your program has grown like crazy, so you get it on the road, and it wears you out those weekends. And Coach Kramer told me a long time ago, he could see how stressed out I was. He's like, yo, just be a skills trainer, man. I'm like, okay, well, why? You can train anybody because you ain't got to worry about people coming to your worrying about you possibly stealing a kid. And it didn't make sense to me. And then when I got out of my Admirals and dove into skills development, man, you can touch so many more kids, so many more lives. And then when they send you videos of them working on the move or having a great game, man, it just touches really different. So I can speak to that as well. So I appreciate you touching on that. Let's talk about, I put here the average basketball player. We see a lot of kids at the factory from as young as, we stopped doing 5-year-olds, but let's say some 6-year-olds squeeze in there, all the way up to some college players where we see a big variety of players. But I want to talk about just the average player and what we see on a regular basis. Devon, I'll start with you. What are the positive things we see on the average player we come in? And then Kris, you can piggyback, and then we'll talk about the negative. But let's just strictly talk about what we see, the kids that come in, the positive things that we're dealing with each.
So what I see positive with the average player is they're not overstimulated with the game. They're not worn out by the process. They're fresh, they're new, they're willing to learn, they want to learn. If you're teaching them right, obviously it's important who the teacher is, but man, they pick up things quickly. It's like painting. Like you got a blank canvas and you're just kind of going to work, and they're eating up things. And again, They're a lot more receptive to learning what's new and their imagination is going. So there's definitely positives there. But ultimately, again, I think it's all subjective, and we always say, me and you talk about it all the time, like the game changes overnight. So we've seen average players, and it's not many, kind of flip and figure some things out and become pretty good players. But the margin for error in that is really small, but it's not impossible.
Yeah, appreciate it. Chris, add to it.
Yeah, Devon made some really good points. This average player typically is a multi-sport athlete. So when we get them for that season or the upcoming season, they're really excited to dive in and improve, and we get a lot out of them for that month window or 2 month window of training. But the downside is being a multi-sport athlete, which is a positive. But if they don't understand that they need to have consistent touches, then when basketball's not in season, they don't pick up a ball for 2, 3 months, and all that work goes to waste. So just getting them to understand, getting in consistent touches throughout other seasons. If you're not doing that, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage if you want to make a middle school team or a high school team. So just having that awareness of, okay, basketball season's ended. I did a good job in improving my skill set. Now it's football season. I still need to find, a 30-minute window here and there to get up shots or work on my skill set just so you can keep those skills fresh.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. And just to add to it, because I'm with you guys, I agree with both of you. A positive side, I like what you said, D. We see a lot of kids that come in that they just don't know what they don't know, right? They're just open to anything, and I love those kids. They're sponges. You give them something, they're going to try their best at it. But again, I agree with the negative stuff. There's so many kids that pick a basketball up and they put it down for too long, and then they come back. It's like, well, we know you ain't picked up a ball in 4 months. Well, I've been doing lacrosse. I've been doing swimming. Yeah, you got to sprinkle some basketball in. And Cody touched on that, right? He said when they used to go to fall and they would go do soccer, they're still getting shots up. So I think any basketball player listening or parent, your kid wants to be a basketball player, you're not quite sure, and you can't put it down. You can be heavy doses of basketball during the season, but when it goes to another season, you got to continue to sprinkle some skill touches in. It segues into the next one. What do you think the most important skill today is for a player to possess? Chris, we'll start with you and see if we're on the same page on this.
It's pretty easy to tell what I'm going to say, but from a physical on the court skill set, I think shooting is we've gone that route where shooting is probably the skill set that you need to possess. But I kind of want to touch on the mental side of it, just having the self awareness. The question of why you doing a certain thing. So just have, as a player, understanding, why am I going through this backdoor cut? Why am I spaced out in the corner and I'm going to stay patient? Why am I using a pin down a certain way? And then that kind of correlates with shooting. Why did I miss my first 3 shots to the left? Just having that self-awareness and being able to make adjustments in real time is a skill set a lot of kids that we see when we talk about the average basketball player from that standpoint, they just don't possess as of yet. So if we can kind of give them that to keep in their toolbox, I think that, becomes really beneficial for them.
D?
Man, I agree with Chris. Like, obviously, you got your ability to pass, dribble, and shoot. The way the game's played today, shooting's probably the premium, but the mental piece of it's so important. Where I differ a little bit from Chris is, and he's 100% right, but I see it in a different lens as all these players have levels. They want to play at different levels. And obviously, there's some things you got to check off as being a functional basketball player. I think the mental and the IQ piece of it is so important. If we can consider IQ and self-awareness as a skill, I think that's probably the most important. You have some really good kids who can really dribble the ball, can probably shoot the ball at a high enough clip, do those things, but they don't understand how to function within the game, don't really know how to play basketball. And if we're talking levels, man, that can shrink your level. That can almost cut your level completely. You may be projected to be this, I'm used, for example, Division II player, but you can't function within a team. You don't know when to shoot that jumper that's really, really effective, or you can really shoot it, or you may over dribble, don't understand the importance of pass. Like, you can immediately go from a D2 level player to a D3 level player. And I think that's the most important. I think a lot of kids miss the boat in that. And that's the most important skill to have. Now, don't get it twisted. If you're not very skilled, you're not going to be very good anyway within the game. But once you get past a certain level of skill, I think immediately it goes into who one is a good teammate who can play with others, and two who just could outthink you, or like Chris said, just kind of have that mental capacity to get through the missed shots. There's so many kids who play the game, and it's always funny to me when I'm watching them practice. And I get it, there's a competitive trait in some of these kids, but they start missing shots, or they're going crazy, right? Kicking the ball, pulling their hair, all that type of stuff. And if you're looking at the scope of basketball, Steph Curry's the best shooter, right? I think we can all agree he's the best 3-point shooter that we've seen. And I think he's like a career 42% 3-point shooter. So in all reality, by the numbers, he's missing more than he's making. Now, don't get me wrong. You shoot by yourself, you definitely need to make way more than you miss if you're in a workout shooting by yourself. But man, you get to games and kids are like, they're packing it in when they miss their first one or two shots, and they just don't have that mental stamina to get through tough shooting nights, or not understanding like, man, you might miss a couple and then you might reel off a couple. So to agree with Chris in that sense, I believe that's the most important skill, my opinion, that you have in the game.
Yeah, and I just saw this yesterday. They put this new stat out. I don't know if it's going to be NBA. It's called limbo. I don't know if you heard about this, but now coaches are going to be tracking what they call limbo is what do you do after a mistake? If you turn the ball over, you miss a shot. What's the reaction time? So I don't know if that.
Wow, I like that a
Yeah,
lot.
it's kind of cool, right? I was like, that's interesting, right? And then it got me thinking about even at the lowest level, right? When kids miss a shot, they turn it over, their body language and things like that. Like that's a big deal. They definitely have to overcome that. That segues me into the next subject. So let's talk about like mental toughness of a kid. Does that come from parents? Does it come from the kid? Does it come from coaches pushing that? Or is it a combination of everything? Chris, what do you think?
It goes back to community. It takes, coaches, parents, teammates to, give that player, positive reinforcement and positive feedback to help them out. I don't think it boils down to one person, but it takes everybody. You got to give these kids freedom, allow them to make mistakes, and you just give them that positive reinforcement to get over things at a
D, what do you think?
Man, I agree. I think obviously it takes a village. I don't think we can pin it on one person, but I'm going to give the parents a tough time in this one. I think when we talk mental toughness, we're in a space where the parents, they don't believe in the kid. It's tough. Like I see so many situations where the parents, they lose trust, or they never truly had trust in their kids. And I'll elaborate on it. We're in a space where you just see so many kids struggle battling through adversities, and at the end of the day, these are young kids. Like their brains aren't developed to the point where they went through, or not only their brains, but just their experiences, where they went through enough experiences to really build that piece of it. They're obviously being taught to push through and never give up and all that type of stuff. But if the actions don't line up, I see so many parents who want their kids to be the guy or the girl, but the actions don't show that. I've been fortunate enough to be around some really good ones, really, really good ones. I mean, you got the Loves, you got the Robersons, you got the Flemings, just to name a few. And I've been around plenty of more, but they all share a very similar trait. They believe in their kid, truly believe in their kid. The ship's gonna sink, and their kid is gonna sink with it in terms of it's no running or it's minimal excuses. And you just don't see that enough. So when things get really, really, really tough, man, it's really tough for that kid to dig deep because they don't see it enough. And it may not even be that the parent doesn't believe in the kid. The parent might not believe in themselves, being the ones that raise the kid. Sometimes on the flip side, and that can be it for another pod, some parents there's over belief in their kid, and it could be to a detriment. So yeah, to answer your question in terms of mental toughness, man, it's tough for kids to get to that level of mental toughness when their surroundings aren't quite built for that.
Yeah, I agree with both of you. It's community, it's all of us. I think coaches have a big say in it, but we don't see the kid as much as the parent. I'm a parent, so I go through this. You guys will go through it. It's not easy. We're gonna have some parents on, and those are the type of conversations we need to have from some parents that have been there, done it, and some that are starting out. I still talk to a lot of my Admiral parents, and they all say the same thing, man, parents are soft today. I hear it all the time. I'm like, okay, there's some truth to that. I believe that times are a little bit different, but there's some overbearing parents as well. It can go both ways. It's a hard balance, right? And I've told people all the time, there's no correct way to parent. So it kind of dives me into the next thing. We're talking about advice for different types of parents. Kris, you can start. Let's talk about a parent that shows up to, could be the factory or just to basketball for the first time. So it could be any age, but we'll talk grassroots. What advice would you give to a parent that is new to the game of basketball?
First time in the gym, just find a place where your kid can connect with either the coach, coaching staff, teammates. Because I think step number one is you got to spark an interest, and the kids got to enjoy it. If you're new to the game, that's the most important step, is getting the kid to enjoy the game, develop a passion for it. So the connection between whatever program you decide to choose, just making sure that connection is right, and taking your time and finding that correct location, a correct program, or correct coach. The connection is the most important part.
Yeah, I agree that because I do the little ones at the factory, second and third graders, and man, there's some parents out there that they just started playing basketball. They're already yelling at them. That kid, I don't see him the next time.
Yeah, they're gonna push them away, right?
Yeah, so I totally agree. I know it sounds so simple. Just to find some passion for the sport early is great. All right, the next one, D, for you is, now let's talk about the next step. A kid that's been playing for a few years and just showing a little bit of potential, kind of getting ahead of the other kids in their group. What's some advice for that parent?
Find the best teachers. I think that's such a underrated thing. Find the best teachers of the game. As a coach and as a teacher myself, we all have different traits. We all have different ideologies and all that type of stuff. So that's kind of a tough answer, so to speak. But hopefully that individual, that parent is kind of following their child, kind of seeing the field and the pool of players and kind of understanding what their child needs. But I would say definitely find the best teachers. We always talk about, got to keep the main thing the main thing. And we have so many families as well as players who are kind of chasing things that aren't really important, for lack of better words. They're smoke and mirrors. It's not very important. And that kind of becomes the primary focus and the primary thing to chase. I think to negate some of that stuff, find the best teachers, find the best individuals that's maybe done it, had players that's done it, has a background that can line up to maybe what you're looking for, has had different type of players, has had a player that's similar to your child, knowledgeable, obviously hardworking, those type of things. But I think all of those things kind of come together and cultivate a really good teacher. So if I could give any parent advice, seek the best teacher. I think that's probably the most important.
Yeah, and I saw something today from Phil Handy. I put it on our Dropping Dimes Instagram feed. He talked about how youth coaches are the most important person in basketball in regards to that's when they start out. To your point, Kris, they got to fall in love with it. And then we got to teach them a good foundation. Because even Tap and Cole, they made some comments where they don't have time to teach a kid something when they get on their campus as a freshman. Like, you don't know this already? They've been playing 4 or 5 years. So again, that's a lot of onus on skill trainers to do that. All right, next one, Kris, going a little bit further, advice for a parent that maybe this kid is starting to really focus on one sport. Maybe they get into 8th, 9th grade, and this is what they really want to do full time, and they're really trying to pursue this and just strictly stick to basketball. What's some advice for those kind of parents?
Always tough, narrowing it down to one sport. I would tell a parent to make sure when you decide going forward, do your goals and commitment level align with where you're at now, based on the trainer you're with or the program you're with. You guys got to be on the same page and make sure that the place you're at can maximize whatever your potential is, and just play to your strengths and give you, a better opportunity to be successful in that one sport that you do choose.
Yeah, and I see a lot of kids. So I talk to a lot of parents about this, is they're scared to make a change. Like, you may have outgrown your program and you may be a little more serious than the other players in that organization. And they're worried. They're like, do I stay and it's safe here? I could still be the best player, or do I need to go to something that's a little more uncomfortable? Those are tough conversations. But my advice to a parent is, if your kid is showing some potential and wanting to commit to this sport, then I think you need to get out of your comfort zone and go do something else. That's just my personal opinion. Then the last one, D, for you, is advice for parent, is a high school kid showing potential to play college? Like maybe freshman, sophomore year, they're getting some looks, possibly some letters in the mail, maybe some attention. What's some advice for that parent?
Keeping the main thing the main thing. Man, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he was telling me within his club there was a young lady who had a really good spring, and she was fortunate enough to get some, and she's a freshman, I believe, going into her sophomore year, and gained a lot of college interest and some really good offers. And parents went nuts in the sense of they went into overdrive. Like the kid worked really hard, and then the parents felt as if, okay, now we're starting to see the fruits of our labor. We got to put everything on 10, on a million. So they began to just overwork. There is a such thing as being overworked mentally, physically, and I think this family did that. And she came in the summer, and obviously, if you follow the space of club basketball or AU basketball, that summer period is very important. That's when they all kind of come out, and just another opportunity to be evaluated and put your best foot forward. And this young lady not only was spent physically, mentally, just the pressures of trying to follow up that spring kind of devoured her, and she wasn't very good. And unfortunately, they didn't handle it well, and she lost some opportunities. I think those who are starting to show early, I think it's important that you don't get away from what got you there. It's really easy to think like, okay, I'm here, I need to do more, or I need to go here, I need to go there. That's not always the case. I think if you stay consistent with your patterns, and gradually kind of grow within what you're doing. But I believe a lot of parents, they try to go an overhaul. I think that's more destructive. So I would just say definitely keep the main thing the main thing. Stay on your path. Continue to work. Don't deviate from what got you there, but don't overhaul to keep it or to go another level. What's meant for you is meant for you. As long as you remain humble, as long as you continue to outwork. Most times those kids grow within the game. They just become more experienced. They go through more matchups. They see different kids. They feel different bodies. They gradually kind of start understanding. And sometimes the parents can start seeing like, okay, we need to do this.
Yeah, I agree. I've talked to a lot of parents where their kid blows up one summer. Okay, you don't change who you are, right? And I think that's hard as a parent. You kind of get caught up with the hype, and then you get a little wired, and you kind of move a little different. I also think it comes back to community, right? You may have to reach out to some people. If your kid's getting offers and you have no idea what's going on, then just slow down and call somebody that's been through it. I think Lupe kind of talked on that. You got to have people in your community that you definitely trust. So that would also mean that you probably need to play for a program that is having constant communication with coaches that can help you with that. Great points. All right, let's close out. We got a couple of questions, some final thoughts. So you can both go to this one. This is from a parent. What's advice you have for us or our athlete who has outgrown his friends or his teammates or his team that he's on? So Chris, you can start. What's some advice you'd give to that family?
Oof. We see this a lot.
We do.
You need to put yourself in a competitive environment to where every day you're growing. Most importantly, you're leaving practice and you've learned something, a new skill set. You're learning something new every single time you touch the court with that program. There's nothing wrong with wanting to play with your friends, but there comes a point in time where, you brought it up earlier, you got to be uncomfortable. And that's truly how you grow. And, a good part about changing settings is you get to experience a different environment, different kids with different views on the game or different views on life. And, the more of that can't help, it can only hurt. So kind of goes back to what I said earlier about making sure that, you should be setting goals, and your goals and commitment level need to align with that of the program you're with. And every so often you have to sit down and reassess what you want to get out of the upcoming year, upcoming AAU season, or does this program play to my strengths? Will it teach me how to be more successful in high school based on the type of offense I run? So just having that in mind and just making sure the goals align.
Yeah, good stuff. D, you want to add to it?
Where I do agree, and Chris, I've also seen the other. I think first, just defining what outgrow means. Obviously, if you have a high level player, environment is and community so important. Those high level players need an environment to where they're being challenged. They need an environment where they're being pushed, learning new things. They're not constantly dominating without giving effort and just building bad habits. But with that said, if we're talking outgrow, if it's a outgrow in terms of talent, sometimes you may not need to go chase any of those things. Sometimes it could be a detriment. I've seen kids in the past stay put. They may be by far the best player in that club, and they stay put. They're in an environment where the kids around them know what it is, and they put those kids in positions to be the one, to be the leader, to be the best player, and they follow. In this space, although we want everybody to be leaders, or we want our kids to be leaders, this thing can't work if there's not followers. Who does the leader lead if there's no followers? And sometimes that's an organic space to where that leader or that really good talent can grow into who he or she's supposed to be. If that person is constantly chasing, I hear the term all the time, and I've said it before, if you're the best player in the gym, go find a new gym. And that's not always great advice. In this space, it's a really competitive space. And I'll give an example. There's a really good kid who goes chasing another gym, trying to find players better than him. And when it hits the fan, they're all kind of fighting over the basketball. They're all kind of doing the same thing and trying to be the best player and trying to be the leader. And naturally, neither one of those kids become that and kind of miss the boat on that. Whereas there's a kid who is in an environment, a very healthy environment, very fertile soil to where they can grow. They're around kids who can hold their own, no matter if they play in the city or if they're traveling, like those kids can play. If you kind of disrupt that and go against the grain and always trying to find the smoke in terms of, I want to play with somebody better, when does that player learn to be the alpha or be the leader or take the best shot or take the responsibilities of wins and losses or take the responsibility of competing against other really, really good players? So again, another loaded question, great question. And I think it's so subjective in a sense of, man, chasing better in terms of players and those who are around the player is not always productive. Sometimes the environment's set and the environment's good, right out with it. Now, the moment it's not, it's not. You gotta go. So it's all subjective. But again, if I could give advice there, I would definitely say just kind of know your situation, know your kid, know who they are.
Yeah, I agree. It's case by case for sure. I think the ideal word is have a balance of both, but that's also a tough one, right? You have a kid that's probably the best in their program. They want to go play with some better kids, but they need both. If you go over there, you may not getting good touches. You may be standing in the corner. You may be super nervous. You're actually really not getting any development. I think you need both, but that would come with community. Would a organization allow a kid to come over, play, get some reps, develop, but then also play with their other like local community team? We've got one in the factory. We have a local team there. And I think there's some kids that need to go do something else, but also need to stay there as well. It's an interesting conversation. It's something I will be bringing up on other podcasts to just see where the city's at. But again, community is everything. If we, as coaches, parents, skills trainers, everybody just work together, I think we can eventually get kind of a little bit of both. Last two questions for you to close out. Kris, we'll go with you, and then Devon, I'll give you a second question. This is from somebody who said, what advice do you have for any coach wanting to become a skills trainer?
It's a good question. I think the number one tool that you need is you need to be able to connect with the kid and build trust. The game of basketball is great at, developing relationships, building connections. Once you can do that, I think it's easier to get a kid to buy in and then coach to your strengths and just continue your education. We want our players to play to their strengths. You should have a grasp of what you do well and kind of cater what you want to do around that. And then as you grow, just continue your education. But I think the biggest thing for me is being able to connect with an athlete, getting them to trust you, develop that relationship, and that goes a long ways.
Yeah, you do a good job because I know all the kids that you train, they've been with you for a long time. It's not like you see a kid one time and then you never see him again. So how are you able to keep kids continue coming back year after year, actually week after week as well?
I think getting them just to understand the routine aspect of, if they truly want to improve their game, the consistent effort needs to be there. It's not something that's going to happen overnight. You don't have to grind for 2 hours every day, but just having a plan, having a routine to execute that plan, and then that's gonna set you up for success. So you got to get kids to understand that. It goes back to enjoying it too. I mean, got to enjoy this game. Got to enjoy the coaching side, the training side. If you don't enjoy it, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah, I agree with that. I know since we got Shoot 360, what is it, 19, 20 months ago, I heard a lot about that at Shoot 360, man. You got to connect with the kids. You got to make sure. I'm like, yeah, whatever, man. I'm the coach that's on your neck every day. I've changed a lot seeing the kids that come in and just see the enjoyment and how much the mental side outside of just the game is huge. You do a great job of that. So I appreciate you touching on that. All right, D, close us out. For you, a similar question, but someone that wanting to get involved with select basketball or maybe starting their own organization. So what advice do you have for a young coach wanting to get into your space?
I think you hit it, man. Just community, right? Like seek counsel first and foremost. Don't believe that you can do this on your own. I know a lot of former players kind of branch off to this, and our method or our way of how we got to being a collegiate player, whatever our level was, we just grinded. We grinded until things happen for us. And this space is not always that. You can grind, but you're not necessarily working or learning the right stuff. So you're kind of just grinding in one space, or you're hustling backwards is the term we like to use. More guys or girls are interested in coming into space, seek counsel. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to reach out. Don't be afraid to seek mentorship in this space and how the game works. You know, as players, sometimes we see the game a certain way and we're really good or we're really athletic. So things kind of come a little bit natural to us. And we want our kids to be that way. We want it to be easy for y'all. Why can't you do this? You should be able to do this. But in our reality, it doesn't really work like that. Seeking counsel, kind of seeking guidance, seeking mentors, real mentors, people who's going to be honest with you. You know, I've been fortunate to have some really good ones that's always going to keep it 100 with me, always going to tell me what I'm doing right, wrong. Also, just work. I think it's no substitute for the work. Learn, get what you need to get, learn what you need to learn, go where you need to go to coaches' clinics, go hop on YouTube, watch games, whatever you need to do. In terms of the work, working in your craft, live in the gym. Live in the gym. There's no substitute. You just said it yourself, Mark, like every day, but we're in the trenches together. Gotta live in the gym. It's really no substitute for it. Like there's no other way in this thing other than living through it. And that work that you build and you learn and you grind for, you gotta trust it. You're gonna go through so many different emotions, right? You're gonna be high, you're gonna be excited, you're gonna be low, disappointed. But ultimately, if you trust your work and trust what you do, like, man, you always have hope. You always have a little shining light at the end of the tunnel. And ultimately, if you're doing the right stuff and you're being true to the kids and you're really working, like, it's going to pay off. It's going to work. I'm still in my race. I'm still climbing and trying to do my best every day. But that would be the advice that I'll give for those interested in coming into space that we're in now. But so rewarding. Being around these kids and watching them grow is very, very rewarding.
Yeah, love it. I agree with everything you said. It's a process, and it's a process of everything we do. If you're a kid, it's a journey, it's a process. I'm a referee, it's a process, right? You go through a lot. And as coaches, it's the same when you're starting out. It's a profession. And I get very frustrated when I see just someone throw coach on the back of their t-shirt and now I'm a coach. No, this is a profession. I don't think people respect how much we grind every single day. I love what you both said throughout the podcast. Is community. And the three of us, we have a great community. That's why I think the factory has been so successful. When you've joined me over there from 8 years with UD, 13 to Chris, and I would not want any other two coaches in our facility helping mold and grow kids today. So I appreciate you both coming on. I know this was a little out of your comfort zone, so I appreciate it. We got it going. So thanks again. We'll be seeing you guys soon. Appreciate you both. Thank you for listening to the Dropping Dimes podcast. Make sure to go follow us on IG at Dropping Dimes Pod. Remember, each Friday we'll be dropping a new episode, so hit the follow and bell notification buttons to never miss any content. Let's get better together. We out.